Back now to the fight over an automatic series of decreases to the spending increases we're getting this year that the president first proposed and signed into law, and that had bipartisan agreement. Iconic Washington journalist Bob Woodward found himself in the middle of a fight with the White House in the wake of all of this after he pointed out that the president, who had a debate with Mitt Romney, came out and said the Republicans started this. It was their idea. And Bob Woodward, who had been granted an all-access tour to the White House and writing his book, said that's absolutely not true, that he has it confirmed that this was the president's idea. This is the White House's idea, something Jay Carney conceded on Fox News last week. Now the fight goes on because the administration continues to attack Woodward, and Woodward expressed disbelief this morning on MSNBC about what is happening with this White House. Watch.
Under the Constitution, the president is commander-in-chief and employs the force, and so we now have the president going out because of this piece of paper and this agreement. I can't do what I need to do to protect the country. That's a kind of madness that I haven't seen in a long time.
Joining me now, Ben Ferguson. He's the founder of the Icon Radio Network and host of The Ben Ferguson Show. And Bernard Whitman, who's a former pollster for President Clinton and author of 52 Reasons to Vote for Obama, which is now sadly outdated, Bernard, but
hey, we won.
I'm sure it's selling like hotcakes nonetheless. All right, guys, welcome back to the program. So what Woodward was speaking about was President Obama's decision to announce that the sequester is going to force an American aircraft carrier not to deploy to the Persian Gulf. And Woodward is expressing disbelief that the commander-in-chief would not deploy an aircraft carrier he says we need because of this piece of paper. Your thoughts on it, Bernard?
You know, he calls it a piece of paper like it's a meaningless document. The fact is, it is the law of the land, and President Obama has been sworn to uphold that law, so he's got to. I mean, the fact is, the sequester is like throwing an unguided meat cleaver at the budget. It's going to cut across the board. It's not targeted. It's going to harm our defense. It's going to harm national security. It's going to harm vets. It's going to harm seniors, teachers, first responders. And I think Bob Woodward would do well to look at one of his last books, War Within, where he criticized President George W. Bush for rarely leveling with the American people, not telling them what was going on, not telling them what to expect. Say what you will about President Obama, but he is being very clear to the American people about what the impact these cuts are going to have.
Perhaps not as clear. Wait, hold on. But perhaps not as clear on how we got to this point. He is guilty. The Republicans are guilty. There's plenty of guilt to go around. But he would have us believe, as he said in that debate with Romney, that this originated with the Republicans. It did not. His spokesman would later admit that it originated at the White House. And so now we have a situation, Ben, where the president wants us to believe this is all about the Republicans. They want us to believe it's all about him. They signed on to it too. And we've got these decreases to the increased spending that the president says are going to be catastrophic.
Well, I mean, for him to act as if he's going to now abide by the law of the land, I wish he would have done that by actually passing budget since he's been president, which he chose not to do and had no problem governing this country and allocating funds without a budget. Now, all of a sudden, we've got a non-increase on the increased spending, and he's acting as if the world's going to end. It's not going to end, first of all, but he is playing politics and holding people hostage with this. And I think what Woodward's point was, it's the first time we've seen a president that is purposely chosen to make things terrible on purpose and hurt people's lives on purpose to win a political battle by not sending an aircraft carrier, by saying we may not be able to secure the border, by saying that I'm going to have to wait 3 hours in an airport to get screened, to say we don't even know if all the airplanes will be able to take off. I mean, you're looking at the reality of the money here compared to what the increase would or would not be under this plan. And he's purposely saying, how do I make this the most painful? And that is their game plan now, and they're doing it well.
Bernard, I mentioned this earlier on the program, but even the Daily Kos came out today. This is a far left website, and came out and said, this is clearly a shot across the bow. This is in reference to the release of these illegal immigrants who had been arrested. By the way, their cases are still going to go forward, but now they've been let out on the streets. He says it's clearly a shot across the bow at Republican obstructionism. So it seems like the left and the right are agreeing that there's some gamesmanship going on now with the cuts that we're about to see.
Well, there's no question about that. And what's really frustrating to the American people is the fact that the American people spoke very loudly in the election in November. Back then, 2/3 of the public wanted a mix of spending cuts and tax increases. That now has risen to 76%. A majority of Republicans, 56%, want to see a combined integrated approach. And the fact that the politicians could not sit down and agree and understand that we cannot simply have across-the-board spending cuts without doing serious harm. And what the public wants is for these people to get together and agree on a proper mix of revenue increases, particularly among the wealthy, as well as targeted spending cuts that won't do harm in a way that the sequester will, which is going to suck $85 billion out over the course of the next 6 or 7 months.
No, 5 years. 5 years. It comes out over 5 years, just to clarify. But go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, where was the president today? The president was on Capitol Hill, and he had time to talk about Rosa Parks, which he should have done, but doesn't have time to actually work on a budget deal and get this done right now, which is proof that what you just said, I'd be in favor of them coming together. It's obvious the president is wanting this crisis that he helped create and he's supposed to be leading on. He wants it to come down the wire solely for political reasons. And if he actually wanted to not have everything that you're describing happen, while he was at Capitol Hill, he would have had a few extra meetings while he was there because that's his job as president.
Well,
but he doesn't want to, and that's what Woodward was saying is,
well, he's having a meeting on Friday.
Is okay with this.
He's
Friday on the deadline day.
I mean, Bernard, what of that?
Doesn't sound like a good idea.
What of that? I mean, the meeting, he's finally meeting with the congressional leaders on the day that the cuts kick in?
You know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see Harry Reid and Speaker Boehner and the president get together, come out of the Oval Office and say, you know what, we're going to use Simpson-Bowles as a framework going forward. We're going to go back to that. It made a lot of sense. We should have, frankly, adopted those recommendations back then. We'd be in a lot better shape.
Bernard.
I fault the administration and the Republican leadership equally because, frankly, we've got a framework to deal with this, which we ignored, and now we're in the crisis that we are in.
Isn't he cute, Ben?
And the president's the leader.
And then we'll have the rainbows and the unicorns come out. It would. He's right. That would be a beautiful thing, but it's not going to happen, Ben.
They're not.
We're stuck with the leaders we have.
Yeah. And he doesn't want it to happen, and that's the obvious point of Friday. He believes he's got the biggest microphone in the country. He'll fly around the country like it's campaign mode. He'll scare people in the military. He'll scare seniors, and he'll tell you your life's going to be awful for a few days, and he thinks that it's going to work to his advantage. Welcome to politics and why most people hate politicians.
Ben, it's not about scaring people. The fact is, 3/4 of the American people, you can hardly get 3/4 of the American people to agree about anything. They have said they want an integrated, balanced approach. Why don't the Republicans
he's not
understand
even willing
they
to do
lost
that.
the election?
Well, let me just say this, Bernard, because you raised that point earlier. We did have a tax hike at the beginning of the year. We did have that.
On people making $400,000.
Okay,
that's right.
and
That's
right. But now you're
$400,000.
saying those same people should be hit with another tax hike.
No, I'm saying that we need to bring that down.
You said the rich, but you said the rich should be faced with another tax hike, which even if the rich gave all of their salary, 100% of their salary to the federal government, it wouldn't solve this problem. So what, I mean, even if we did that, if we gave the rich a double tax hike, you know, in the first 90 days of the administration, where are the spending cuts?
Look, I absolutely agree. We have got to have targeted spending cuts. I think there's a lot of room in the defense budget to actually cut. But doing it across the board in an untargeted way is an improper, irresponsible, and reckless way to manage government. And look, I fault the administration, but the fact is the Republicans refuse to consider any revenue increases, and their refusal to do so and their obstinance ultimately is going to come back to bite them in the you-know-what.
It's amazing that you actually win the election, and yet you act as if you're so helpless. It is astounding to me that you win the White House, you've got the Senate, and you're literally standing on national TV describing a party that is like infants that need someone to take care of them 24/7. If you're such great leaders, be a great leader and have the president, while he's on Capitol Hill, have the guts to sit down with his own party and the other party instead of waiting until Friday, which is crisis creation from this administration. It's embarrassing.
The Speaker has proven that he can block legislation regardless.
Great job, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.
Coming up next, a Vietnam